Welcome, everybody, to another Read Your Genes podcast. This is Dr. Kevin Connors, where we go over the questions you may have on your genetic workup. So let's get to the few questions that we had today. First one, what does the cannabinoid system do in your body, specifically the CNR1 gene that we test for on your genetic profile? So what has become known as the endocannabinoid system in your body is, in fact, uh, numerous cannabinoid receptors. So you have receptors on, on nearly every cell of your body for cannabinoids. So cannabinoids are most commonly thought to be in marijuana and hemp, but actually cannabinoids are a chemical that are found in a lot of different herbs. And those then attach to and affect those receptors. So the effect on the different receptors, cannabinoid receptors on the different cells, have to do with what that cell does. So it's not always the same effect. Now, there's a lot of different cannabinoid receptors, and the study on these is ongoing. So specifically, the CNR1 gene that we test for, that's a cannabinoid receptor that's found in the brain and in other parts of the body. So let's talk a little bit about the CNR1 gene. That has been probably one of the most researched cannabinoid genes and what that receptor does. So that gene, if a person has a lot of defects on that gene, the person, remember, just because you have a lot of defects on a gene doesn't mean you're going to have the symptoms of that gene not working at all. So just keep that in mind. However, knowing that you have a lot of defects on that gene family, because this is a family of several dozen genes. So knowing that you have a lot of defects on that family of genes can help you understand some things and can help you change lifestyle things. So what you would want to do, knowing you have CNR1 gene defects, is you would want to be more careful with the use of cannabinoids, specifically with the use of marijuana. So, or, you know, maybe even CBD. So being careful of that, I mean, they have found that people with a lot of CNR1 gene defects can end up having more issues with addictions. So more addictive type personality. So some people have said long before we knew about genes, back in the 80s and 90s, we used to talk about some people have more addictive personalities. Maybe they in their family, they more easily get addicted to alcohol, or they more easily get addicted to drugs, and they know that because they have that history in their family, so they're more careful about those things. With the CNR1 gene defect, some studies have shown that a person can be more prone to substance disorders. So that would be good to know that, so that you can maybe, especially since now when marijuana is becoming legal everywhere, seemingly, and the recreational use of that is becoming acceptable in society. It's not outside the cultural norm anymore. Um, Knowing that you have a lot of defects, you might want to shy away from that, just because, hey, just like, okay, let's say my dad was an alcoholic and my several uncles were alcoholics and my grandpa was an alcoholic. That's why I've decided to stay away from alcohol. Not that I have any alcohol issue right now, but I don't want to have an alcohol issue. You don't need a genetic profile to know that. So you should make decisions based upon uh, ancestry. But knowing you have this gene defect, that's one thing you should be aware of. This gene defect has also been involved with um, people with some emotional mood disorders. So um, if you notice that you tend to be more neurotic, more you get which where you get stuck on something, more OCD-ish, more argumentative, um, hard to see other people's point of view, um, then we don't want to blame things on our genes, but it can tie to that. It can point to some of that. You also look not only just at that gene. Whenever you're looking at genes, you don't just look at that gene. You look at other genes. That's why in our genetic profile we put the CNR1 gene in with the neurotransmitter genes, because the neurotransmitter genes tie a lot to mood and mood disorders. So, like, if I have a lot of MAOA genes, the MAO gene defects, I can produce excess serotonin real easy, or not produce enough serotonin. So it can lead to depression, or it can lead to anger outbursts and disagreeableness. So knowing that, um, you can make some lifestyle changes to help protect yourself. So, um, if you have a lot of defects in a lot of the um, the neurotransmitter genes, you just need to be more careful about things that could set it off. If you go, okay, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? Well, even food allergies can set that off. Even excess sugar can set it off. Be aware of triggers that change your mood. Are there things that after I eat this, I feel depressed? Or exposures, after I'm exposed to mold, I feel, anxious, or I have a lot of OCD issues, or I have a lot of anger issues. What sets you off? Look for triggers that maybe set you off. The truth is, a lot of people, a majority of people, you could say, have a lot of defects in their neurotransmitter genes, and things can trigger them or set them off. So look for triggers. Um, a good course to take is the autoimmune course, because that really digs into looking for triggers that can trigger your immune function, that can compound and worsen an autoimmune disease. Well, it's the same way with neurotransmitters. Well, like I say in several of the videos, if you have MAOA defects, you don't want to be taking excess methyl groups, like which have been so common with naturopaths and chiropractors telling people, oh, you have an MTHFR defect, so you need to get on methylfolate and methylcobalamin right away. And they're putting these people on relatively high doses of that. Well, not looking downstream at other genes. If you have other defects in the biopterin pathway genes, which are all your neurotransmitter genes, that can be the exact trigger that sets that off and causes you to go into rage or anger or OCD or depression or sadness, or so look at the things that trigger it. It can be in foods that you're eating, it can be in supplements you're taking, so just be careful of that. Well, that kind of ties to this question. Can you explain how to balance neurotransmitters with food? For example, symptom of depression and lack of motivation. Does that mean low serotonin? What foods would balance this? I do have a blog post about this on the course that you can look at. But it's not as simple as that. It really goes back to looking for what triggers you, because an inflammatory process in your gut can trigger a neurotransmitter imbalance. So let's pretend I have a gluten sensitivity that I've never addressed, and I am still eating gluten. And every time I eat gluten, it's causing this inflammatory process in my gut. And that's going to cause inflammation in my brain, whether I have COMT defects, MAOA gene defects, or cannabinoid defects, or whether I have excess or low amount of neurotransmitters, it can set off and worsen my condition. So it's not so matter of like, okay, I'm going to eat more of this because I have this defect. It's not as simple as that. You have to look at you have to go back to the triggers. And I know I keep using that, but that is really the key. That's the key to managing an autoimmune disease, and it's a key to managing mood disorders. And you have to experiment. Somebody with depression goes on a supplement with lithium, and oh my gosh, it helps balance them, like the BH4 Assist product we have. Now it has, a relatively high amount of lithium in there, and that can really help balance their mood and balance their thinking. But another person, it could just be the thing that tips them over, and it makes it worse. So as much as I wish there was just a secret formula that you just do this and this and this and this, if you have this symptom, and it's just like a algorithm that you can follow and a chart that you just do, it's never that simple. You know, that's why you have to practice and experiment with yourself, because two people could have the exact same genetic picture, and one person does really well with lithium, then another person does well with like a dopamine type stimulation. So you just have to experiment with things. So don't buy a lot of anything. You got to try different things and see what helps balance you. But it's more than that. It's lots of times it's not just a supplement, or it's not just a diet. You have to look at the triggers. That's what people, most of the time when they're looking at their genetics, that's one thing that they miss. They think that it's just going to be a supplement that's going to solve their problem, or a specific diet that's going to solve their problem. You have to look at other triggers too. Could be environmental triggers, could be toxins in their environment. Um, I've had people where they can't seemingly get better, but they have mercury fillings. They had to get their mercury fillings out and to detox that before they could get better. Or people that were exposed to mold in their house. They could never get better until they dealt with that mold in their house, because they had a high level of mycotoxins in their body. So that mycotoxin toxicity was constantly a trigger in their body that no matter what they did dietarily or supplement wise, could never get over that. It was always throwing off inflammation in their brain, causing a neurotransmitter imbalance and causing mood disorders. So as much as we'd like to keep it simple, you got to keep digging to find out what are your triggers, what else could be an imbalance that you have to deal with. So that's why on the course, the Read Your Genes course, you can run those other labs through our Rupa Lab store. So you can run a mycotox test. That's a really good test to run, because that is a common trigger, is mycotoxins. Those are toxins from mold exposure. It could even be mold exposure from 10 years ago. So next question. When I have ones on a gene, does that mean it's bad? So remember, no. So a one is a single allele defect. A two means that you have a double allele defect, and typically that's worse. Now, some defects can be beneficial, like the defects on your lactase genes for milk. If you have a double allele defect on both of those, you actually make more lactase, and you'd actually be able to break down the sugar in milk better. But that doesn't mean you don't have a casein problem, which is the protein in milk, and that's where 99% of milk allergies come from, is the protein, not lactose. But most genes, if you have a one or a two, that means the genes work not quite as well. So there's going to be hindrance to that gene pathway. It's not going to work as well, and it's not going to be to our advantage. So having a one is quite common. So I wouldn't really worry about the ones on your genetic profile. It's the twos that you are more concerning. But it is really the big picture that's the most concerning. So if I have a gene family with 6 genes in it, and I have ones or twos on each gene, well, then that's a concern to think about and look into. And what can I do to support this? Am I having issues that this gene could possibly cause? If I'm not, then don't worry about it. But if I am, then maybe look at the triggers, look at ways to support it nutritionally and everything. But if you have a gene family with 5 or 6 genes and you have a couple of ones, I wouldn't worry about it at all. It's the ones where you have a conglomeration of problems on all those genes, or most of the genes in that gene family. Okay, hope this was helpful. We'll get this up on the site and get this out to share. Thanks so much.